Welcome to our best of, where the original poster did not have an ordinary family fight. No. He simply kidnapped his own 79-year-old mother. And by some statistical miracle, that was not even the worst thing anyone in that family had done. The original post appeared on our legal advice, and it opened with all the subtlety of a brick crashing through a window. Can I get arrested for taking my elderly mother out of my brother's house without telling anyone? When someone writes a sentence like that, the rest usually includes at least 3 crimes. A lasagna recipe and somebody crying in the backyard. And honestly, this story delivered almost all of that. The author, whom Reddit started calling Mason, said he was 43 and had a 79-year-old mother named Dolores. Although the family called her Dot, his father had died 2 years earlier. And that was when the gears started grinding. Dot had been left with the house, a comfortable pension, some savings, and, more importantly than all of that, a memory that came and went. It was not severe dementia, according to Mason. It was the treacherous kind of decline that makes a person forget where they left their glasses, yet remember with perfect precision who owed them $50 in 1998. In other words, confused enough to be underestimated, lucid enough to realize when people were trying to rob her. It was in this cozy, wholesome family setting that Mason's older brother, Trent, stepped in. Trent was the kind of man who asked where the documents are during the funeral. He offered to help Mom move into her house with his wife Kelsey, and took over everything: medication, bills, bank cards, phone, visitors, groceries, and probably the oxygen in the living room too if they could have had it notarized. Mason said that at first he even thought it sounded reasonable. Trent lived closer. Mason worked a lot and not said in short phone calls that she was fine. But her fine started sounding strange. Always too short. Always with someone answering in the background. Always with that hostage energy of someone trying very hard not to blink twice. Then came the details. Mason said he started visiting his mother at random times and found a collection of absurdities, worthy of a museum: an empty refrigerator, locked cabinets, medication outside the original bottles, her clothes disappearing, the late grandmother's jewelry evaporating into thin air, and the house carrying that unmistakable smell of neglect masked by cheap disinfectant. Dot showed up with bruises on her arm. Trent said she fell. Kelsey said she bumped into doors. Dot said she did not remember, which, conveniently, served to absolve everyone who benefited from her not remembering. Mason tried to talk about it. Trent reacted the way every innocent saint reacts, by yelling, insulting him, and saying his brother was an ungrateful piece of garbage who never helped. Kelsey, that swamp fairy, added that Dot was difficult, moody, and getting more confused every day. The translation of that sentence, in the dialect of opportunists, is simple: she is still breathing and sometimes disagrees. Everything changed when Mason got a call from his mother herself at 6:12 in the morning. From the kitchen landline, she was whispering. That alone is horrifying, because nobody should have to whisper in their own house as if they were hiding in a basement during a zombie invasion. Dot said only, "Get me out of here." Not today. But soon. Then she hung up. Dot in the comments, Reddit had reactions. Half of them asked why he had not already called the police. The other half asked whether his mother was legally capable of consenting to leave. And to be fair, that second half was right. Because between rescuing an elderly woman and kidnapping an elderly woman, there is a very thin legal line. And the system loves pretending it can see that line without tripping over it. Mason replied that he had already called Adult Protective Services twice. Both times, Trent turned into a rehearsed angel. Clean house, pills neatly lined up, doughs hairbrushed. Kelsey serving tea like she was campaigning for an Oscar for Best Fake Daughter-in-Law. Dot, in front of strangers, said everything was fine. Mason explained that his mother was terrified of conflict and, worse, afraid of being sent to a facility. Trent used that like an invisible chain. Every time she disagreed with something, he threatened, "If you keep this up, we'll put you somewhere with bars and badges." It is funny how some children talk about nursing homes with the same warmth people use when talking about sending an old refrigerator into storage. Things got much worse on a Sunday. Mason showed up unannounced and found his mother asleep in the afternoon, drooling on the couch, completely out cold. Dot never slept in the afternoon, never. She was the kind of old woman who, by 3 o'clock, had already cleaned the kitchen, watered the plants, judged the neighbors, and watched half the news while yelling at the television. Mason looked at the medication bottles and noticed a new sedative prescribed by a doctor Dot had never mentioned. He photographed everything. He also photographed a printed spreadsheet on Trent's table with expenses from Doe's money, including cash withdrawals that, quite coincidentally, matched a new car in the driveway and an indecently huge television in the living room. All of it paid for, apparently, by the silent sacrifice of a little old lady who barely had decent yogurt in her refrigerator. Then came the kidnapping part. Mason said that 3 days later. Dot called again early in the morning. This time she sounded firmer. She said Trent and Kelsey would be going out that night for a friend's birthday dinner. She also said that her bag was already packed, hidden in the towel closet, along with a box of photos, medications, documents, and an envelope. Then she said the sentence that made all of Reddit sit up straighter in their chairs: "If you come, do not come to visit me. Come to take me." And he went. According to his account, Mason arrived at 8:40 p.m. with his pickup truck. Dot was ready on the back porch with the coat, the bag, and a fat cat named Pickles inside a carrier. The detail about the cat was what convinced a large part of Reddit that this was real. No elderly woman makes a genuine escape without taking her favorite animal. She got into the truck by herself, buckled her seatbelt by herself, And, according to Mason, even complained that he drove like a nervous divorce. They stopped at a 24-hour pharmacy, then at an ATM, and then went to a roadside motel because Mason did not want to go straight to his own house, and hand Trent the address on a silver platter, complete with ribbon and discount coupon. Before leaving, Dot placed a note on the kitchen table. A very short note, and glorious in its simplicity. "I was not kidnapped. I left. Tired of you." The signature, according to Mason, had the two little loops in the D of Dolores that she always made when she was angry. Read it, naturally. Fell in love with that detail with the same intensity it reserves for hating people who abuse the elderly, but the next morning came with police. Trent reported his brother for kidnapping, abuse of a vulnerable adult, and theft from an incompetent person. Nothing says class like calling someone a criminal from a phone paid for by the mother. You are exploiting. The police found Mason at the motel and went to speak with Dot, and this was where the story nearly turned into one of those judicial tragedies. That gives readers acid reflux, because Dot, being awakened and surrounded by police officers, got nervous, confused, and started mixing up dates. She said she thought it was Tuesday when it was Friday. She asked for her dead husband. She called one of the officers pastor, even though he clearly looked more like a man who sells supplements online. Mason wrote that. In that moment, he thought it was all over. But then his mother looked at Trent, who was standing in the hallway with that slimy expression of a corporate martyr, and her lucidity snapped back like a slap. She pointed at him and said, "That man stole my rings, my cards, and my peace. I left because I still have legs. Now get him away from me." There it was. Sometimes lucidity is not a continuous state. Sometimes it shows up just long enough to humiliate the right person. In the comments, someone asked whether that would be enough. Mason replied that the police did not arrest him, but they called social services and recommended a formal competency evaluation. Meanwhile, Dot was taken to the hospital. Trent started telling the entire family that Mason had manipulated a sick old woman. Aunts appeared from the void to give opinions. Cousins who had never visited Dot, not even on Christmas, suddenly emerged as experts in ethics, law, and elder care. Families have this astonishing talent for being invisible during the problem, and extremely visible during the inheritance. 2 days later, Mason posted the first update, and this was where the story became even more unhinged. At the hospital, Dot alternated between moments of confusion and moments of absolute clarity. During one of them, she asked for paper and pen. She wrote down a list of dates, amounts, names, and places, all tied to money Trent had withdrawn. She also included missing jewelry, a watch that had belonged to her late husband, the name of the doctor who had prescribed the sedative, and one dry note that sounded like it came straight out of a Neuer film, starring an eventual grandmother. "They gave me medicine when I asked questions." Mason handed that over to a lawyer who specialized in financial abuse of the elderly. The lawyer, who had probably already seen the worst of the human species both in suits and out of them, told him to make copies of everything immediately. He also advised Mason to request the bank statements and a formal neuropsychological evaluation. Trent's side of the family, of course, reacted like cartoon villains, lots of noise, very little logic, and an obscene amount of performative outrage. Then Mason revealed what had been inside the envelope his mother had hidden in the bag. Inside were copies of old bank statements, a key, and a flash drive. Yes, a flash drive. Because apparently Dot was more strategic than 90% of Reddit, and 100% of her children. The flash drive contained audio recordings Dot herself had made on her late husband's old cell phone. Weeks of audio. In some of them, Kelsey complained that the old woman was living too long. In another, Trent said that if his mother completely checked out, they could finally sell the house without any headaches. There was also a recording in which Dot asked to see the balance of her own account. And Trent replied, "You do not need to understand that stuff, Mom. You just need to take the pill." Lovingly monstrous. A true floral arrangement made of human garbage. The update exploded. In the comments, everybody wanted to know the same thing. Had Dot planned her own escape? And Mason answered that yes, more or less, she had. According to him, his mother had been pretending to be more confused than she really was at certain times. Precisely so Trent would speak freely in front of her. Dot could not organize everything all the time, but she knew enough to realize that her son treated her like a safe with arthritis. So, she started hiding evidence. She hid a second wallet. She hid copies of documents. She asked her manicurist to open an email account for her months earlier. And she used the nickname of an old TV show as her password because, according to her, young idiots think old people only know how to knit. Soon after came the second update. The medical evaluation concluded that Dot had mild to moderate cognitive impairment, but she still retained the ability to express consistent preferences about where she wanted to live and whom she trusted. In plain English, she might forget the name of the Secretary of Health, but she knew perfectly well that she did not want to die drugged. While listening to Kelsey chew salad in the kitchen, with that, the judge authorized temporary guardianship shared between an outside administrator and Mason, while Trent was investigated. And then the Mildew Castle started collapsing. Bank statements showed dozens of withdrawals. Neighbors confirmed frequent yelling. The pharmacy pointed to strange prescription refills. And when the doctor who had prescribed the sedative was confronted, he said he had never prescribed continuous use at that dosage. Kelsey tried to claim there must have been confusion with the medication, of course, because there is always some mysterious confusion whenever money disappears, jewelry disappears, lucidity disappears, and only the parasite keeps getting fatter. But the final blow had not come yet. At the next hearing, Dot decided to speak. Mason wrote that it was one of the most absurd scenes of his life. His mother walked in with a cane, a navy blue coat, impeccable hair, and a necklace of fake pearls because, according to her, the real ones were probably pawned by that giant rat Trent already. When the attorney asked whether she had been kidnapped, Dot replied, "If I had been kidnapped, I would be complaining about the ransom. I left because I prefer a roadside motel to being drugged by my own son," according to Mason. Even the court clerk nearly choked. Then she looked at Trent and delivered the line that became Reddit's favorite. "I changed your diapers. If I had known you were going to end up drugging me over a used SUV, I would have picked the orphanage. Cruel." Yes, deserved. Absolutely. The judge did not like what he heard, nor what he saw. He ordered the criminal investigation expanded and forbade Trent and Kelsey from returning to Doe's house. When the police entered their room to collect some items, they found jewelry, Doe's documents, expired bank cards, mixed-up medications, and a folder containing real estate listings and evaluations of the property. Trent, of course, kept insisting it was all a misunderstanding. The problem with the chronic liar is that he always thinks the sentence is not what it looks like. His magical powers. It does not. Sometimes it is exactly what it looks like, only worse and with receipts. Mason then posted one last major update several weeks later. Trent was formally charged with financial abuse of an elderly person, misappropriation, and neglect. Kelsey entered the classic mode of a scoundrel's wife caught red-handed. She cried, swore she knew nothing, and then tried to negotiate the return of the jewelry like she was trading loyalty points. The family who had treated Mason like a kidnapper began acting as if they had always suspected Trent. The famous cowardly revisionism of Sunday dinner. Well, this is where came the detail no one expected. After all that war, everyone assumed she would move in with Mason, eat soup, and watch crime shows at offensively high volume. But no, Dot announced that she did not want to live with either son. According to her, she had already spent enough years cleaning up after grown men. She sold the house, protected what remained of her estate with the administrator's help, rented an apartment in an independent senior living community, and left with pickles, her fake pearls, and a list of rules that made Mason laugh and cry at the same time. Rule number 1, no family member enters without notice. Rule number 2, Trent enters only in hell. Rule number 3, if anyone tries to manage her life again, she will call the police herself. And this time, without sentimental baggage. But there was still more. In the final postscript, Mason said he discovered something his mother had hidden from him until after the hearing. In the same secret email account where she kept her documents, Dot had also been corresponding with an 82-year-old man named Leonard, a widower, a retired mechanic, a professional connoisseur of jazz, and specialist in geriatric flirting. The two had met at a crossword group in the library months earlier, back when Trent still thought his mother barely knew how to use a phone. Leonard was the one who taught Dot how to use audio recording, flash drives, and cloud storage. In short, while her son treated her like a sedated houseplant, the old lady was building a criminal dossier with the help of an octogenarian boyfriend, who wore a beret and signed his messages "Your favorite criminal." Mason wrote that. On the day he took his mother to the new apartment, Leonard was already there with flowers, a toolbox, and a folding chair in case some bastard needed to get hit while sitting down. Pickles hated Leonard on sight, which Dot interpreted as a sign of chemistry. 3 weeks later, the two of them were going out dancing at 79, after nearly being drugged and sold off in installments by her own family. Dot decided to begin a romantic new chapter. Honestly, she earned every second of it. The original narrator closed the story by saying that, technically, Mason may indeed have kidnapped his own mother in the dramatic sense of the word. But, in practice, it looked far more like the delayed rescue of someone who had nearly been erased while still alive, by the people inside her own home. And I agree. There are times when the law arrives in a suit, late, asking for paperwork. Conscience, meanwhile, shows up in a pickup truck, grabs the old lady, the cat, the medicine bag, and gets the hell out. So no, Mason was not the villain in this story. The real horror was the son who confused caregiving with access to a bank card, and the daughter-in-law who thought tea, sedatives, and a sweet voice added up to a personality. And the best part, Dot survived, won, and came out of the whole mess with a new boyfriend. Trent tried to steal the last years of his mother's life and ended up, accidentally, financing the liveliest season she had ever had. That is karma in pearls, dark lipstick, and her own wallet. Now tell me, was this kidnapping, rescue, or just the most elegant way a mother could finally put her trash son back in his place?